Merci, Madame la Présidente. This evening, I want to remind Canadians of some history. Sue Rodriguez was a vibrant, outgoing woman, an athlete who loved hiking and cross-country skiing and gardening, an active mother to a little boy named Cole. She received her diagnosis of arterial lateral sclerosis, what we used to call Lou Gehrig's disease, a few days after her 41st birthday. The degenerative disease affects everyone differently, but in her case, it hit fast and hard, leaving her virtually no control over her body, affecting her speech, taking away from her all the things that made her life precious, including her ability to care for her boy. So she decided she didn't want to wait for ALS to take her life. She asked the courts for the right to a physician-assisted death, taking her fight all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. In 1993, that case divided the country, and it divided the court. Rodriguez lost narrowly by a vote of 5-4, but even that did not defeat her. On February 12, 1994, with the help of an anonymous physician and the support of her friend, parliamentarian Sven Robinson, Sue Rodriguez died on her own terms. If I cannot give consent to my own death, whose body is this? Rodriguez once asked. Who owns my life? Whose life is it anyway? For her, the answer was clear. Her body, her life, her death, her choice. Catherine Carter, known to her friends as Kay, was a retired teacher, an avid traveler, a mother of 7. She was living in a retirement home in Lynn Valley, British Columbia, when she was diagnosed with a painful progressive neurological condition called spinal stenosis. The doctor said I would end up flat in a bed, unable even to blow my nose, Kay Carter wrote. She described the condition as her body collapsing in on itself. In January of 2010, unable to access medical assistance in dying in Canada, the 89-year-old woman elected instead to travel to Zurich, Switzerland, so that she could obtain the medical care that was denied to her here. Gloria Taylor was a devout Christian, deeply involved with her United Church community and a lover of Harley-David motorcycles. A mother and grandmother, she was working at a residential care facility for those with developmental disabilities in the Okanagan when she was diagnosed with arterial lateral sclerosis. I'm a positive thinker, she once told a reporter. I look for the beauty in life. But I'm not afraid to talk about dying. It's part of living. I have no trouble accepting that. But Taylor, too, wanted to die on her own terms. So, along with the family of Kay Carter, she lent her name to a case brought by the BC Civil Liberties Association, another constitutional challenge of the law against medical aid in dying. Taylor won her case in the BC Supreme Court and the BC Court of Appeal. But in a bleak irony, she died of complications of a perforated colon while her case was pending appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. She was 64. Sue Rodriguez, Kay Carter, Gloria Taylor, none of them was facing imminent death. Let's remember that, because it's the crux of this whole argument. In 2015, the Supreme Court ruled on the case where Gloria Taylor and Kay Carter's family were named as the plaintiffs. The court did not hedge. Their ruling was clear. The court held that the criminalizations of medical aid in dying unjustifiably infringed Section 7 of the Charter and were of no force and effect if they prohibited physician-assisted death for a competent adult person who clearly consents to the termination of life and has a grievous and irremediable medical condition, including an illness, disease, or disability, that causes enduring suffering that is intolerable to the individual in the circumstances of his or her condition. Let's break that down, shall we? The person involved must be competent. That means they must have the necessary mental capacity to make their own legal and medical decisions. The person must clearly consent. There must be no coercion and no possibility of misunderstanding. The person must have a grave, untreatable, incurable medical condition, be it a disease, a chronic progressive illness, or a serious disability that causes enduring suffering. Not temporary discomfort, not inconvenience, but real and permanent physical and emotional suffering. And finally, the suffering must be intolerable to that individual, that specific person, in their own personal circumstances. In other words, what might be intolerable to you might not be intolerable to me or to my cousin or my neighbor. The court recognized that only we can say for ourselves what we are able to tolerate. The court did not say that physician assistance was only for people who were actually dying. No, they specifically said that MAID was for people just like Kay Carter and just like Gloria Taylor and just like Sue Rodriguez. People whose disabling conditions made their lives so horrific to them that they wanted to die with as much dignity and comfort as possible. People who wanted one final chance to exercise agency after so much agency had been taken from them. Despite that, Canadian law has never yet conformed with the terms of the Carter ruling, and that is the whole point of C-7, to bring the law into alignment with the rights enumerated by the Supreme Court in 2015. We are finally doing what the court asked us to do. I in no way wish to discount or dismiss the concerns many of my colleagues have raised about this legislation. Senator Pate is absolutely right. It is a national shame that it may be easier for upper middle class white people to receive MAID than it is for poor people of color to get decent medical care. In a country that likes to pride itself on its universal health care system, we still have a long way to go to ensure true universality, especially for people who are homeless or incarcerated or struggling with addiction. Every study of the social determinants of health tells us that poverty itself is a cause of illness. And until we confront the inequity in this country, our healthcare system will never work the way it was intended. Senator Batters is absolutely right. Our country does not offer nearly enough resources or treatment for those with mental illness, particularly depression. We should all share her outrage that it can take months, if not years, to get a proper psychiatric referral. And it would be a grotesque perversion of medical aid in dying indeed if it were misused as a treatment for suicidal ideation. Senators McFedrin and Mével-Deschênes are absolutely right. People living with disabilities may well feel pressured or coerced or bullied into medical aid in dying, or more subtly, they may feel their lives and their human rights are diminished by a widespread cultural acceptance of MAID. I repeat what I said last week. We must stand together as senators to fight for the rights of Canadians with disabilities to full and equal participation in their communities, and for the economic, social, and medical supports they need and to which they are entitled to live their lives to the fullest with dignity and joy. But MAID isn't about taking away the rights of people with disabilities. It's about empowering anyone with a disabling condition that causes enduring, intolerable suffering, about giving them choice and free agency and control. Senators McCallum, Christmas, and Boyer are also right. It would be a moral outrage if First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Canadians who already face such documented prejudice in our medical system were victimized by MAID, whether they were pressured into asking for it or whether they were denied timely access because doctors and nurse practitioners who offer medical assistance in dying were not available to them because of distance and geography. We need healthcare providers who are sensitive to Indigenous culture and spirituality and history. We also need to ensure Aboriginal Canadians, including those in rural and northern Canada, have access to the full range of health services other Canadians take for granted, including MAID. And Senator Platt is right to raise the issue of conscience. Freedom of religion is a charter-protected right in our country. Because Bill C-7 amends the criminal code, it is not an appropriate place to add conscience rights. We don't want to criminalize or recriminalize elements of the provision of MAID. Instead, the provinces that administer health law and the colleges of physicians and surgeons and the colleges of nursing, which regulate the work of doctors and nurse practitioners, must strike the right balance. Healthcare providers should not be pushed or pressured into providing MAID if that violates their spiritual faith or moral principles. But we also don't want to leave patients, especially in rural or remote areas, unable to receive medical assistance in dying in a timely and comfortable fashion. We must counterpoise the legitimate conscience rights of medical professionals and the equality rights of suffering patients who want to exercise their civil and personal liberties. Because whichever side of this debate we're on, we surely all agree on this. We need a public healthcare system that is more accessible, more equitable, and more responsive to the individual needs of individual Canadians. We need a system that puts the needs and wishes of patients first, without subordinating those needs and wishes to political ideology or economic expediency. And we need to put the protection of the rights of the vulnerable at the center of our decision-making. That includes the rights of those who want to live as long and as comfortably as possible, and the rights of those who have decided of their own free will and with clear, competent resolve that their grave, irremediable, enduring suffering is intolerable to them. Because what, after all, could be more ableist than forcing people to live in hopeless agony and fear, because we think we know better what health care they need and how they should spend their final days. Parce que sénatrice Petitclerc et sénateur Carignan avaient aussi raison, le projet de loi C-7, c'est une question d'espoir. Il s'agit de donner aux gens l'indépendance, la liberté et l'autodétermination. Et sénateur Cormier a raison aussi. This debate is so painful precisely because it forces all of us to confront our own mortality and our own morality, to face our own fear of loss and our deep fear of loss of control. As many of my Senate colleagues have said before me, I thank all of you from every corner of the country and every group in this chamber for engaging in this essential existential debate with both passion and compassion, with thoughtful legal reasoning and careful public policy analysis. I'm grateful to everyone who drew from their own life experience, often intensely painful personal life experience, to speak to this bill. But this evening, I call upon us to do our duty and live up to the expectations of the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court of Canada placed upon us in 2015, to give Canadians their charter right and their Carter right to their freedom to die with dignity when their time comes. Sue Rodriguez, Kay Carter, Gloria Taylor. They were Canadian heroines, Canadian champions. They were not weak. They were not cowards. They were not quitters. They were strong and brave and dauntless. They were women of valor. May their memories forever be a blessing to their families and to our nation. And now let us honor their courage and sacrifice, et aussi le courage de Nicole Gladu et Jean Turchon. Let us keep our promises and support Bill C-7 as amended. Merci, thank you, hi hi.